don't you think there are other groups that you could align yourselves with that aren't as those who showed up in Charlottesville, that aren't explicitly white?
Could you just, like, cool it on the Nazi side of things? We kind of see eye to eye. We're on the same page. Yeah, no, the Democrats are anti-white racists. No, that we're both on there. But you're also kind of siding with the KKK. Could you maybe just not party with the KKK as much, and then we can get back to, like, what we are really trying to do here, which of course is the superiority of certain categories. So someone who does a lot of coverage of the right said, Lance, you should see this old video. Apparently Michael Knowles and James Allsup pretty much revealed a lot of stuff that they were going to do in what became Charlottesville before Charlottesville actually happened, but no one's talked about it. I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen it.
Today, we'll be speaking with Charlottesville Unite the Right speaker and embattled Washington State College Republican President James Allsup, plus Josh Yasma, Aaron Bandler, and thank goodness, Amanda Prestigiacomo. All turned it down. So the only people that I see there are neo-Nazis, neo-Confederates, white nationalists like Richard Spencer, white identity advocates like Identity Europa. Why? My straightforward question to you is, why would you go? What were you thinking going?
Well, I was actually going to deliver a speech about nationalism as a concept, not, ethnic nationalism, about nationalism. I was going to speak about how nationalism is not a hateful philosophy, but it's a philosophy that is based around love of, your country and your fellow countrymen. And I don't think it's quite fair to say that the only people there were neo-Nazis. I was on the ground there, and I
think there were others. I think there were white nationalists. I think there was Richard Spencer was a leader of it. I think there were neo-Confederates. I think there were people like I forget his name, the man who organized it, who said, "Screw Lincoln, I'm a Southern man." I think there was a lot of Southern pride there, but
a lot of the people he just named, he went through a lot of names there, right? And then he's like, well, I mean, you got like a Richard Spencer in there. He's what you could call a white nationalist. Then you have Identity Europa members, which of course that's Lawrence Southern's outfit. Those members are, yes, they are white supremacists, extreme white supremacists. And their movement in Europe is largely centered around the belief that there is a white replacement conspiracy theory in which, again, some cabal of, we all know what group they're talking about when they mention them, are controlling and bringing in a whole bunch of immigrants into Europe in order to dilute the racial purity of the country.
And there were a lot of neo-Confederates. And I agree with you. I don't think it's fair to call them all Nazis. But there were swastika flags there. And what's worse than that, I didn't see anybody from the other side, any other people from the right wing. So when I...
By the way, I wouldn't interview someone who's a part of the American identity movement, who is just an avowed pretty much white supremacist, unless you were looking to promote issues of white supremacy on your show, right? Why would you ever entertain this person?
See, Unite the Right, I think it couldn't even unite the alt-right. It couldn't even bring the alt-light guys around. And then my question to you is, knowing that, even I understand you want to give a speech about nationalism, knowing the optics of that, knowing that you're known by the friends that you keep, why appear with Richard Spencer and the KKK?
Well, I don't think anybody knew the KKK was going to be there. I certainly didn't when I went there. And to be fair, I don't think the KKK really was there. I mean, we're seeing this in the media, right? The fake news media is trying to make this out to be some kind of KKK event. But there were no hoods. The pictures they were showing were from months ago. That's all a fake news narrative.
But you would say that Richard Spencer's a white nationalist, and you would say he was involved in leading this event.
By the way, I just want to give you a quick, we'll run down James Allsup. James Walker Allsup is a far-right political commentator and podcaster. He's stated that he prefers to be described as a, quote, American nationalist. He was a member of the American Identity Movement, a white nationalist and neo-Nazi organization until it was disbanded in 2020. Allsup formerly co-hosted a podcast on the neo-Nazi network, The Right Stuff. He has a YouTube personality until his channel was removed by Google as part of the policy to remove content affiliated with white supremacy. In 2015, Allsup was elected president of the Washington State University's chapter of College Republicans. In August of 2017, Allsup attended the neo-Nazi Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. After the rally turned violent, he resigned as president of the College Republicans in the WSU in 2017 before being re-elected later in November of the same year. He was unable to take the position per university rules as he was set to graduate. In 2018, he ran unopposed as the elected precinct committee officer of the Precinct 129 of the Whitman County Washington Republican Party, and on January 7, 2019, the Whitman County Republican Central Committee voted unanimously to eject Allsup from the party and to not recognize his vote on the committee and to withdraw his voting seat.
So I guess my question then is, why would you allow yourself to be associated with somebody like Richard Spencer?
I don't have to agree with everyone at an event, right? By appearing at an event, I'm not in no way co-signing the opinions of everyone else who's there.
Of course, but did you agree with anyone at that event? I understand if they have some kooks and then they have other points of view.
Wow, Michael Knowles asking the tough questions. I guess there is a bar for Michael, where he's like, guess I'm going to bring you on your show, but I'm going to say that, hey, you're at an organization that is filled with neo-Nazis, white supremacists, KKK members, Richard Spencer. I mean, a lot of bad people. Would you disagree? Or, like, what do you have to say about any of that? Oh, well, I don't necessarily agree with all of their takes. I can say that much, right?
and it's a free speech event and it's a Unite the Right. I understand that would be a different thing. But did you agree with any of these people there?
It depends what topic you're talking about. I mean, on something like economics, for example, Spencer and I have very different philosophies about a lot of that stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And by the way, we would have heard what all of these opinions are. We would have heard all these different opinions, and we could have an accurate representation and understand what these people actually believe in if the event had been allowed to continue.
Sure, I agree. Clearly the police
fact
did very little. Clearly Antifa were bullying everybody all around. You know, it's in the fake news media, but occasionally they get something right. This event has been called Unite the White. Do you think that there was a white identity that was the major component of this event?
I can't speak for everyone else who was there. I know that I was going to speak about nationalism.
But do you think the event was primarily a white identity event? I understand you weren't there for that. I'm not asking about your motives. I'm just asking if you think that was what the event was.
The podcast I Don't Speak German is the excellent resource explaining who all these people are. I'll check it out. I've never listened to it before.
I think that may have been an aspect of it. Sure. I mean, but at the same time, you know, we have these events across the country. We have Black Lives Matter events. We have La Raza on hundreds of college campuses. Black and Hispanic.
Oh, you said these events. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? If one group of people are in opposition to white supremacist oppression, that's different than a white supremacist group aligning to oppress people. Do you understand? They're on polar opposites of each other.
Identity is completely seen as completely okay by
course, yeah.
you know, the mainstream media and the left. So,
but do you think those are okay? Do you think Black Lives Matter and La Raza and all those other ethnic identity groups are all right?
Oh, this is kind of wild. I can see why someone sent me this, because maybe this is something that Michael Knowles doesn't bring up as much, or because like this is a weird position to see him in, of all people, where he's actually playing like fucking. But you have to admit things are a little too far, right? Because things did get out of control. I mean, we've all seen the video at this point. We saw the blood and soil stuff, and I mean, that is pretty much like neo-Nazi rhetoric, is it not? And all of them chanting like, you know, Jews will not replace us. That's pretty neo-Nazi. Like, I'm just saying, regular people, everyday people that I encounter, even everyday conservatives, they're not chanting Jews will not replace us as they walk to the supermarket. So that was kind of interesting to see take place.
And if you don't think so, as I don't think so, then why is it any better when we do it? When white people do it?
I don't condone violence. Yeah, no, I don't condone violence.
But I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about this identity mob organizing that now we're seeing replicated in some ways on the alt-right.
Sure, but I think it's fair to say that you can differentiate between black identity movements like the HOTEP movement, for example, and Black Lives Matter. So I guess Black Lives Matter wasn't a great example. I completely, you know, I think that the violence perpetrated by people like Black Lives Matter or La Raza in California, that's despicable. But I don't.
Wait, what? The violence perpetrated by Black Lives Matter?
Necessarily think there's something wrong with you know, these identity movements, because there is a you know, one of the unfortunate truths when you look at societies that have a lot of political stratification like we do is that people will often align along racial lines. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm not saying that's a positive.
But you think we have to admit it and we have to accept it? And are you saying that the right in this country basically has to appeal to white identity if it's going to have a future?
I'm saying, well, I wouldn't say it like that, but I think what you're seeing is, if you look at the data from Pew Research, you're seeing that the Republican Party is becoming more and more made up of white people, and you're seeing that that actually minorities, African Americans and Hispanics, are becoming further left. You're also seeing white Americans become further right. So, and that trend has been happening since the 70s, and as that trend continues, I think we will see some, you know, continue to see political realignment in that way.
I think it depends. I grant you some of that. And I think it depends a little bit on how you define left and right.
You
in
grant
the 70s,
some of
the
that.
80s and 90s and 2000s. But I'm a little confused because the alt-right has, you know, embraced. I think it basically defined itself as you are defining it, leaning in toward white identity, appealing to white demographics. And yet, the alt-right is a very new movement. As a political movement, it's only about a year old in public. And during Barack Obama's presidency, we did not see the Tea Party and other grassroots movements appealing to white demographics, and yet we took over the whole country. We won so much, we almost got sick and tired of winning. We took 1,000 seats in state legislatures. We got 24 governorships out of 32 Republican state legislatures. We took the Congress, the Senate, and the presidency. It looks like we did pretty well without explicitly appealing to white identity. Tell me I'm wrong.
And we got nothing done. I mean, Obamacare's still in place. We have, you know, no new protections on trade. We didn't build the wall. Yeah, Republicans are great at getting in power, but they're awful at getting things done when they get in power.
But it seems a little confusing to me, because it seems to me that you're saying that as an electoral strategy, in order to win elections, we need to appeal to white demographics. But that doesn't seem true from the last 8 years. And then you'll say the trouble is we get elected and we don't do anything. And I totally grant you that. I absolutely grant you that the Republicans in Congress have been squishy and basically useless. But they seem to be different questions, right? How do we win elections? What do we appeal to? And how do we operate once we're in office?
I think we can't be purely introspective when we talk about this question. I think we also have to look at the Democratic Party. And the Democrats have been going down this road where they're employing a lot of anti-white rhetoric, and they're aligning themselves with people who are very, very anti-white, with anti-white messaging. And look, you know, for young
Yep. So this is wild. So this is basically Michael Knowles, back around the time of Charlottesville, speaking to one of the people who was present there, and obviously who has a lot of involvement in white nationalist movements, full-on neo-Nazi style figure, about where are we finding alliances here between, in this case, Michael Knowles is on the other end of, I'm the more moderate member of the two here. I'm speaking on the behalf of just like your everyday conservative voters. How do we work together? Because, like, you got to admit that there was some extremism there, and then, like, the response to that is, well, there's extremism everywhere, right? If you look at the extremism on the other side, have you heard about Antifa, the Black Lives Matter movement, Hotep movements as well? I mean, come on, no, extremism.
White college guys like myself who see a lot of that messaging going on, we're told about white privilege and how white men are responsible for everything. The reaction for some people is to fold and say, yes, you're right, I'm evil because I'm white. But for a lot of people, it's to reject that narrative entirely and say, look, you know,
so I don't have a lot of privilege. I don't grow up in, yeah. I totally understand
exactly.
that. It seems to me that for a lot of people, your age, a little bit younger, even as old as I am, we were brought up in this milieu of feminism and being told that straight men are bad and white men are bad and this, that, and the other thing.
Wow, his pushback was all of like 5 minutes worth before he was like, okay, so we're pretty much on the same page now. So yeah, I mean, you can definitely say that the Democrats are decidedly anti-white. We need to talk about that. Why are they anti-white?
Concern is that seems to have provoked a reactionary response that is feeding the worst elements of the identity politics that drove us crazy in the first place. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I can understand that, but I think we also have to look at this as a defensive measure, right? There is a perceived attack, and you know whether this is entirely legitimate or not, there's a perceived attack on white people in this country. It's coming from the media, it's coming from government, it's coming through the education system with affirmative action, and there's a lot to be said for that.
It's in the culture.
Every year, Sure, absolutely. Silicon Valley.
Yes, this anti-white culture. Again, it's like the most moderate of acknowledgement has resulted in a decided pushback from white supremacists fully being like, they're coming after the whites now. And it's like, hey, they want to start mentioning that we should add elements to the curriculum that might explain a little bit about why there are such huge discrepancies between different groups, why there is the racialization of different groups in society. And it's like, holy shit. This entire party is anti-white.
These numbers and these diversity reports every year, you know, the diversity reports, which are essentially them bragging about how many fewer white people they hired. And, you know, look, I don't think anybody should be subjected to that. And I would say that for any race. I don't think any race should have to be, you know, subjected to that kind of thing.
Now, what's
and
interesting...
at the same time...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Okay, I'll finish quickly. I was going to say is that every year, you know, Republican politicians and Democrat politicians consistently agree on bringing in more H-1B visa applicants. This has the effect of driving down wages for American labor. That's really what I'm concerned mostly about, is an America First policy when it comes to our trade and our immigration.
And reducing trade and immigration. I agree entirely, which brings me back to my first question. Believe it or not, there are other groups that have opposed immigration and have advocated for lower legal and illegal immigration, who have advocated for protective trade tariffs since the 90s. Two differing degrees of effect. Obviously, the Bush administration did not take immigration enforcement terribly seriously, tried to push amnesty, and so on. That is the understatement of the year. Don't you think there are other groups that you could align yourselves with that aren't as those who showed up in Charlottesville, that aren't explicitly white?
Could you just, like, cool it on the Nazi side of things? We kind of see eye to eye. We're on the same page. Yeah, no, the Democrats are anti-white racists. No, that we're both on there. But you're also kind of siding with the KKK. Could you maybe just not party with the KKK as much, and then we can get back to like what we are really trying to do here, which of course is the superiority of certain categories.
Identity, white nationalist like Richard Spencer. I'll let you answer. And then there is something I'd like you to respond to that I was perusing on your YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, certainly. And I consider myself to be a paleo-conservative. Look, I got into politics back in 2012 with Ron Paul. So I'm coming at policy from a very libertarian perspective.
Didn't we all? When we were all young, didn't we? Yeah.
We were all naive and thinking about, you know, winning caucus strategies and stuff back in 2012. It was a good time. But so I come at it from a libertarian perspective with a lot of this stuff. And so I look, when I look at politicians, at people like Paul Nehlen, who are excellent representations of what I believe America First policy should be. I look at people like Steve King as another fantastic example of someone who's putting...
Guys, can we put the mask on a little? I mean, this was old too.
Where we talk.
This one kind of slipped through the cracks. Like it's true that not a lot of people use. This was 5 years ago.
About a lot of this stuff. We talked about how the uniparty, the Republicans and the Democrats, are both kind of screwing the American worker and making things worse for everyday Americans.
This is, you know, just to get back, I don't want to drop Ron.
Trying to tap into faux populism, by the way. Like right now, what was happening in BC is a really good example of this. There's a union strike that is going down at the ports of BC, and as soon as that began, you'd think that the very people, the conservatives in Canada, who are always talking about the blue-collared workers, and they don't care about blue-collared workers in this country. Trudeau doesn't care about that. Well, as soon as it's like, hey, there's a problem between both, you know, the workers and their employers. This is happening right here at a very important port, so it's going to affect supply lines. What do you have to say? And then immediately the conservatives come out and they're just like, no, they need to get back to work. All these workers are fat cats. No, we need to crush these unions and get back. We need to the shipping ports need to open. Because they don't actually care about the workers. It's never about the workers. It's never about, like, you know, the common voter or anything like that. It's just saying whatever they can at any given time to try and get power.
All too quickly. This is one of the reasons why I'm interested in your videos. And I remember, you know, when I was joking that at 17, every young kid on the right reads Ayn Rand and is convinced he knows everything for about 6 months, and then he kind of floats away from it. Usually, you move away from libertarianism, what have you. And my worry with a lot of young people, and with you as well, James, I worry that people are getting famous too young, and they're espousing these views too young, views that might change and views that might be nuanced. And I think you're playing with bad juju with these alt-right guys. And to give an example, we have a clip of Richard Spencer from your channel, from a speech he gave at the Lincoln Memorial. That's clip 001.
We aren't fighting for freedom. We aren't fighting for the Constitution. We aren't fighting to liberate some foreign people who will probably rise up against us 5 years after we leave. We are.
And by the way, when everyone was sounding the alarm on Lawrence Southern, especially when Destiny was trying to popularize Lawrence Southern for, like, liberal audiences and tried to, like, downplay the severity of what she was fighting for, you have but to look at Identity Europa and how she was one of the chief cheerleaders for their organization, especially in the digital realm, and trying to normalize a lot of what they're doing and saying when they have such strong ties to deep anti-Semitic, deep racist, deep xenophobic roots. Like, these are white supremacists.
Fundamentally fighting for meaning in our lives. We are fundamentally fighting to be part of something that is bigger than ourselves. We are fighting to be part of a family together.
And the big reason they all try to hide from it, they always want plausible deniability, is because when you see it for what it truly is, then all of a sudden, of course, people are going to be like, what the fuck? So those are like Nazis? Yeah, like, I mean, they'll try to find whatever ground they can and trying to find a wedge in that statement you just said, as in, like, are they truly Nazis? Can we call them Nazis? Well, I guess not, because these are white identitarians, and so the identitarian movement is deeply, but, like, yes, they are definitely white supremacists who want to forcibly enact power through, and to, again, subjugate other races under their, like, yes. Okay, fine. As we spend time debating the semantics of how racist they actually are, they're the ones who are on the sidelines not being fucking called to task for what they're saying.
We are fighting to be strong again, to be beautiful again. We are fighting to be powerful again.
The very standards of beauty are directly adhered to whiteness. Doesn't anyone ever recognize that for what it is and then see that and then be like, oh, that's weird, isn't it? Why is there such a thing as colorization? Why is colorization a thing? Why do some people are considered to be more beautiful the lighter their skin tone is? Why is that? You know, to say, like, we need to be beautiful again. I was like, but the very standards of beauty are based upon whiteness in the modern age.
And a sea of weakness and hopelessness. That is our battle. Yeah.
I think he's absolutely honest and absolutely right in describing what he's doing. This quest for meaning. They don't really care about the Constitution. That, you know, there's that meme. But my Constitution doesn't protect anything if you don't have voting demographics. Is how it goes online. The question here, I wonder, is what is that meaning? What is that meaning that the alt-right is trying to embrace? It seems to me it's just the white race. It's the color of your skin and communities that have historically lived near each other. Am I wrong?
Well, I think you'd have to ask Richard Spencer that question. I can't defend and I don't have any interest in defending everything Richard's ever said. You know, look, Richard.
I only ask you because it was on your channel. I only ask you because I know you were at the event, and if you have any, you know, you've spent more time with these guys than I have.
Oh my God, how is Michael Knowles actually, like, holding his feet to the fire on this one? And this isn't even like a gotcha, because this is literally a video on his own channel, you know?
I think what they would say is that they're fighting to I guess continue the flame of Western civilization, right? You know, people throughout Western civilization, throughout history, have built great things, built great empires, done great things. And, you know, the foundations of modern philosophy and art and music, all of this comes out of really, you know, mostly Western Europe.
Of course.
And they're fighting to continue.
So you can't speak like this on one breath and then talk about how your master race is being subjugated and how you're all being, like, told that you're weak or something like that. On one hand, it's like, well, you know, all of the greatness of our current paradigm and society as we know it all comes from white Western people. You know, Western civilization is the core of our very society as we know it. Yeah. But at the same time, the fundamentals of those are being destroyed from within because of a replacement.
That cultural tradition. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
I agree
likewise,
entirely.
You know,
and this is my essential question on that.
I agree entirely. Ultimately, we're on the same page. I'm just trying to give you an opportunity here to kind of step away from the Nazis directly. So you could, I'm giving you masks. That's what this is all about. Would you like some masks, James? I got so many masks for you to wear here. Come on, take your pick.
Because I think that's exactly right. I am an evangelist for Western culture. It's obviously the greatest civilization in the history of man. Obviously, providentially guided.
Obviously.
What is Western culture?
Providentially guided. It's in the Bible.
Because I highly suspect that most of these people know very little about Western culture. What is it? What is the West? What is Western culture?
Well, I would actually argue that one of the greatest manifestations of Western culture and values are the United States founding documents. Mm-hmm. It is this idea that we can have a society that guarantees freedom and liberties to people, but also inspires you.
Yeah, if you're a white male,
bettering yourself. You're ultimately responsible for yourself. And if you think back to the 1700s and late 1700s, we were a country, and we were founded as a country with a very, very small state for a reason. But we were also a country with very large, church groups, right? Communities, voluntary associations. We were founded as a country that would be free from the trappings of European royalty, I guess you could say.
Very religious, while all of Europe is running away from Christianity. Of course, absolutely. Sure, yeah. And equalitarian, by the way. Right? All men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which would traditionally be raised.
And if you look at the 1790 Naturalization Act, it's very interesting because they actually make it a required provision where people who emigrate from Europe renounce all of their former titles. If you were a lord or some kind of royalty in Europe, you actually had to give that up. And to become an American citizen, you had to accept that kind of abandonment of the former hierarchy.
Right.
So I think that the American values we were founded on are actually one of the greatest manifestations of Western civilization.
I agree. And now my question for all of these guys who have a stated goal, which is exactly the same as my.
The 1700s were the greatest of all time, you dipshit Nazi. I mean, should we not look towards all of our standards and bearings to be 1700 style? That's basically going to be from here on out. That's that's the ideal time. That's how we should, guide our own understanding of the universe. We may not have too much in terms of understanding the germ theory of disease, but it's pretty epic.
Goal, which is to promote Western culture and defend Western culture. But as we've just said, the Western culture, it was expressed in these founding documents in the notion that we're endowed by our creator with unalienable rights. All of these guys were Christian. Basically, the West, it seems to me, is a combination of Athens and Jerusalem that spread throughout Europe for 2,000 years. It blossomed in the United States and elsewhere. But Christianity is the central factor, right? Culture comes from cult. It's what we worship. So are these guys Christian? Are you Christian?
Yeah, I was raised Christian, right? I consider myself to be very culturally Christian.
What do you mean by that? Before we go on. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Sure. Continue.
Yeah, no, I'll expound on that. Yeah, no, I believe that the Ten Commandments and the biblical teachings are a fantastic foundation and should be the bedrock of Western civilization and culture. The Ten Commandments and the ideas expressed in the Bible should really be the guiding light for how we treat each other and how we manage our day-to-day dealings.
You sound mostly Christian to me, but where do you disagree with them?
Well, especially the commandments that tell you, not to covet your neighbor's servant, manservant. That one's a good one. Yeah. It's kind of weird having actual commandments, rules for how to covet the slaves of someone else, your neighbor's slaves. Don't envy them. Don't envy them. Learn to accept and find joy in your own men servants. Your own. Yeah.
Well, it's not that I disagree with them. It's just that I don't participate in organized religion to the extent where I would be comfortable calling myself, a Christian.
Do you believe in Jesus?
In that degree. Sure. I think everybody does, don't they?
You believe that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God who came down to save all of mankind and was killed and then on the third day was literally resurrected to redeem man?
I'm not certain. Again, I'm not up on my Christian theology, but I do believe in these teachings, and I think that it is absolutely imperative that we have a respect for the Christian tradition.
I see your point. The reason I want to interject a little bit here is I think there are two issues with what you've said. I think the phrase culturally Christian, I've heard Richard Spencer describe himself that way too. I think it is nonsense. I think it is etymologically not impossible. I think it's semantic nonsense because the word culture comes from cult, right? It's what we worship. So to say one is culturally Christian would appear to me to say we believe in Christ, we believe in Christianity. And yet, whenever anyone says that, there is a caveat that says, I like Christianity, I like the churches, I like the civilization that Christianity produced, but I just don't believe in the thing that produced it. I don't believe in the thing that animated it. And I don't know, I see this a lot on the left. I talk about this all the time.
I love my manservant all the time if you catch my diff.
They want to get a university degree without a university education. They always want the semblance of the thing, the appearance of the thing, but not the
Yeah, I don't need to go into your philosophical religious debate. I don't give two shits about what you both think on that topic. It is of no worth to me, but it is pretty freaky how you had this individual talk to this
Christianity.
way.
I like the churches. I like this. Is there any implication for public policy by these handfuls of studies that have shown some correlation?
Well, I don't know if there's necessarily an implication for public policy, but I think it's an important thing to understand because it helps us understand why certain groups tend to, on average, I'll be very clear, tend to, on average, perform differently than others in society. You look at why there are so many Asians, for example, that get into very top-tier schools. Why Asians do so well in the SAT? Well, it's due to the fact that Asians tend to have an IQ closer to around 110.
You don't think it's
oh my god, they're into IQs. Ugh, of course. It was only a matter of time, really.
cultural? You don't think it's
Americans
because those cultural groups?
No, I think it is because they're born with inherent traits that give them the very high cranial capacities to be able to achieve things that normal people would not be able to, should they not be of that, demographic, of course.
Put more of an emphasis on
Science.
studying, more of an emphasis on schooling. You don't think it's possibly explained by that?
What scientists would argue is that it's a mixture of both. But what scientists
No, you can't start a sentence that way. Well, what the science says. Well, what the scientists are telling us, and let me tell you a little bit about a new scientific process I've discovered called phrenology. Yes, we get to pull out these scientific devices called calipers, and we'll truly learn.
would argue.
Well, I don't have any scientists on, James. I've only got you. I'm kidding. It drives me crazy because this is the thing lefties do. They always say, well, what I think scientists would argue is, and I think, I don't know, you don't know any scientists. I'm not a scientist myself, just a gentleman and a scholar.
Studies, right?
Yeah, so go ahead, you've read studies.
But yeah, no, and this is very well researched, that many of the people who research this kind of thing professionally argue that intelligence is about 80% genetic and about 20% cultural, and through the nurture. It's the nature versus nurture debate, right? And so while certain things that are cultural can influence your ultimate intelligence, if you are born to brain surgeon parents, but you're raised in a crack house, yeah, you're probably not going to be as smart as someone who
Interesting terms you're using right now.
is born to more average parents, who's raised by brain surgeons. So yeah, of course, no one would ever deny that cultural and nurturing aspects can affect someone's ultimate intelligence, but we can't dismiss the genetic aspect of intelligence either.
Whether that is true or not, you don't think that there's any implication of that for public policy in the U.S.?
No, I don't necessarily think so. That's kind of a vague question. I think that.
Do you think that we ought to take into account the alleged racial differences in IQ or categorical differences in IQ when we make public policy at the federal level or at the local level?
I don't think we should, because I think it'd be unconstitutional, right? I think there would be issues with discrimination. And one of the failings of social science like this is that it is not uniform, right? There are bell curves, and when you understand the bell curve, you understand that there are
How come these people seem to brainwash themselves so thoroughly? Like, how can they be so bored and pretend? Well, look, he's got a worldview that isn't compatible with what any rational understanding of the universe around us is going to demonstrate, right? Like, if he was to actually look at science on this aspect, it's going to tell you that there is no such thing as races. Races don't exist. And even people, I think, sometimes who understand that concept in theory, they'll still say things like, well, yeah, but like black people are more predisposed to sickle cell anemia. So you understand that has to show that there is actual proof that black people exist, and so far as we understand them. And the answer to that would be like, no, what you're actually demonstrating there is that there are certain people from certain countries in Africa, in certain parts of Africa, if you happen to have a family descendant or lineage that goes towards those areas, that may have you show higher indications towards a predisposition to sickle cell anemia. That does not mean all black people. When you think of the term black people, what does that mean? Does that encompass all people who are simply black skinned? Does it encompass people who come from certain regions in countries in Africa? Does it mean that you are the descendants of slaves previously who were brought over illegally to the Americas? Or sorry, I should say illegally. Brought over to the Americas, all those kind of things. Like, when you use these broad terms, all white people, all black people, these categorizations, they don't actually demonstrate anything that has biological reality associated with it. There's no such thing as white people. And that's the reason why whiteness is something that changes over time. Whether you are or not white, or considered to be white enough by society, the standards are going to be very radically different. As of right now, yeah, if you're someone who's Irish or Italian in America, you're a white person, right? Back in the day, you would not be considered to be white enough. And the same thing is happening today for different white categories in Europe. Right? If you're a Roma person, for example, you're considered lesser than, so you may not be proper, so you happen to be seen as like exotic or something like that, amongst other categories of people, where if you were an American watching the whole thing, you'd be like, but everyone here is white. I don't get it. What's going on? Why are these people white? Why are these people not white? I don't understand, Sickle cell anemia is prominent in regions with high occurrences of malaria. Yeah, that's what that demonstrates. Not that all black people, by definition, are going to be more predisposed to something like sickle cell anemia. And that's why, when you think about it, like, the beauty of the science is that we've mapped the human genome. We understand the totality of the human genome now. Based on that, we can see that there's no such thing, biologically speaking, as race. We invented it. and all these people trying to use it, you're never going to have eventually a leg to stand on if you believe that there is some inherent difference between artificial categories. Like it'll never work as long as you keep thinking that one category is going to somehow just intrinsically have more of something. They're going to have higher IQs, they're going to have better test scores, they're going to have more higher work ethics, they're going to be better at athletes and you know, endeavors, they're going to be better this, worse that, blah blah. Like all of those, like it's not based in reality. You're just associating everything with what you are considering this giant group at any given time.
A large population in the middle, but there are, you know, 12.5% of the population that's on that upper echelon, and, you know, 12.5% that's on the lower echelon. And so there is certainly crossover, right? There are thousands, if not millions, of people who are, you know, Hispanic and Black in this country who are smarter than Asian people. That's of course.
And science does show us that there can be exceptions to the rule that Asians are the smartest people in all things. So occasionally you'll see that, you know, you might occasionally see like a Black person with a super high IQ. It defies all logic and reason until you understand, see, that of course there's going to be exceptions to this. Otherwise, like, no, this is all racist nonsense. And again, it's weird seeing Michael Knowles be in a position where he is less racist, I guess. Because you've got like a full-on avowed white supremacist on your show talking about how, like, well, I mean, there was KKK members and Nazis there. I'm not gonna lie, they were there. It's like, yeah, you were marching with them. You were marching with them, saying Jews will not replace us. I kind of feel like that's the thing that you're into, you know? I don't know. It seems rather fucked up.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you kindly to our Lord and Saviors Peyton L. Just and Xander Corvus. Without you, we are nothing. And now, a shout out to our Knights of the Square Table. Amazing Flesh, Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, DM Rivera, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hegbard Celine, Izzy Solidarity, La Media Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Nettle, Omni, Peanut Butter Blonde, Political Papi, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Kubi, Cernicus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Dimmel, Thomas, Trevbot EXE, Lucidry, Words Greenwood, Cheryl Alvarez, Tony Perkins, Thomas, O'Pecker, Travis McClinton, and Victoria Bell. Thank you so much. And a huge shout out to all the other people who make this entire show possible. Without you, it would not exist. If you can support us, please go to patreon.com/theserfs, and even $1 can help unlock all of the little goodies and help make this show entirely possible.